what does this project and the last project have in common? Well, they both use this idea of stamping and cloning. So what we need to do is make our current A stampable and clonable. So how do we do that? Again, if we go back to reference, how do we go about rendering this kind of thing? Well, we want to use this create graphics kind of approach as we did in the last project. So we can stamp and clone this stuff. So the first thing I'm going to do is go back to my code. And what I want is for this stuff to be copyable. So how do we do that? Again, we need to look at the reference. We want to set it up somehow and then create a brand new graphic that we can then clone and draw in Draw itself. So that's what I'm going to do next. So the first thing I'm going to do is make some kind of variable. I'm going to call this one graphic because I called it graphic in the last one. So let graphic. So the reason I'm putting this here is I want to use it in preload, setup, and draw. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to say graphic that we made up here is going to be equal to create graphics. So we need the capital G in there, and watch out for the S in the end, something I forgot last time. And in brackets, how big is this graphic going to look? Well, this is the same size as the canvas itself, 600 by 600. So next what we want to do is add what we added previously, not to the canvas, but to the graphic itself. And to do that, all we need at the start of each one of these 5 lines is graphic dot. Basically on the graphic, add a fill, on the graphic, add a text font, on the graphic, add a text size, on the graphic, add a text line. And of course, the last thing, we want to draw this A. Now what this will do on our canvas currently is it will have it in memory, ready to stamp and ready to add to the page. So how do we add this A to the page? We've taken it from the current canvas and instead what we've done is save it to this graphic instead. So to do that, all I need to do is then copy this graphic into my canvas. So how we did that last time is we did copy. So we went into reference and we found copy, which is here. Let's find it. And what we want to do is copy this image or graphic. What do we need to put in here? The source, where it starts and where it ends, and the destination in here. So there's quite a few things in here. What we're going to do in Draw, I'm just going to add some space, is we're going to copy this graphic. Where do we start this graphic? Well, we start it in the 0, 0 in the top corner, and this is going to be 600 by 600. And where do we want it to be placed? Well, we want it to be placed at 0 and 0. And how wide? 600 by 600. So what this will do is it will draw this A in place. So we've taken this graphic and then cloned it later on. Now what we did in 0101 is we had 2 of these, so we could copy this twice. So if I copy this twice, how does that look? Well, what I could do is basically make this half the width. I can kind of skew this now. So half the width would be on here. So I've got this source, first 4, and then this destination, last 4. So in here, what I'm going to say is 300. So what we should see here is half the A. And if I have a second copy, so second copy with graphic, I can do 0 and 0, 600. 600. This is a sample, and then I want, well, let's start this at 300 across, go to 0, 300 wide, 600. So what I should have now is 2 A's in place to look like that. Now that's totally fine. That's kind of what we wanted to begin with. But what happens if I want to add 6 A's? So for instance, I want to say copy again. I want graphic 0, 0, 600. 600 and maybe different numbers in here. Well, if we want to add in 12 or 100 of these, obviously this kind of gets pretty boring. We don't want to kind of keep copying and pasting ourselves. So what I'm going to do in our draw function is add a loop. How do we go about adding this loop? Well, within JavaScript itself, there's a thing called a for loop. So we've got a function, which is function, round brackets, curly brackets. We have things like if statements, which is if, round brackets, curly brackets. We have something called a for statement too, which is for, round brackets, curly brackets. Now the thing that goes inside here, you can see it complaining already, is a kind of a complex thing. We want a start and an end and a step. So I'm going to start this loop. So I'm going to let x. Now what do I want to start with x? X is going to be a cross because we want to draw 6 of these things in here. So I'm going to let x equal 0 for now. And then this is a start point. I'm going to use a semicolon to say x is less than 0. So what I'm doing here is basically making the loop not run for now. I'm going to make the loop run in a minute. But then what I want to do is add in x is equal to x plus 1. So the first time we run this loop, x is 0. Then the second time we run the loop, x is 1. Then the third time, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and keeps going forever. Now the reason I added x is less than 0 for now is just so that we don't run the loop out of control. We'll talk about how to fix that in a second if you do get stuck on this. So what we're going to do now is open up these curly brackets. And now what we can say is x is less than, instead of that, let's make it 6. Let's run this code in this curly bracket 6 times. X is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. It never gets to 6. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is 6 numbers. And what I'm going to do is move this copy from here. I'm going to take it and put it inside here. And I'm going to get rid of this one as well. So we've just got one thing that runs 6 times. So if I look at my page right now, what I'll see is this always at this one place. Even though this is running 6 times, because all of these numbers are exactly the same. What I'm going to do is change these numbers a little bit. So what I'm going to say is each one of these is always going to be 100 wide. This basically thins it out to that. But they're all at the same position. They're all at 300. But I want it to be at 0, then 100, then 200, then 300, then 400, then 500. So what I want it to be isn't just 300 at all points. Instead, what I'm going to do is remove this and say x. Now what if I do at x, this is just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we can kind of see now that this feels like it's a little bit wider than it should be. I want to multiply this. I want to say not 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I want this to be 0, 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500. So I want to multiply this x, so times by 100, asterisk 100. So what we should see now is even though we've written copy just once, what we'll see is 6 things appear. If I change this number, of course, I can change some of this stuff. Maybe I want to make it 12. So this will run 12 times. The issue with this, of course, is we've got this and it's kind of going off screen. So I might want to change some of these numbers. So instead, this could be 50. And this one could be 50 wide as well. So what I should see now is 12 of these across the screen. So what we're going to do is build this up piece by piece. And instead of this kind of going across, we also want it to go down the page too. So next, we'll talk about how to add another loop inside of this.